welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today, I'm with Tobie Morgan Hitchcock and Jamie Morgan Hitchcock. It's Hitchcock, right?
That's the one, yeah. That's it. That's good. Yeah, that's the one.
And they are the creators of SurrealDB. We're actually recording this live from the Rust Nation UK conference, right?
That's the one. Rust Nation 23.
You guys are a big sponsor of this one too, right?
Yeah, we are. We are sponsoring the Delegate Lounge. Yeah, bring table tennis, bit of cornhole, bit of fun.
What exactly is a delegate, to be honest?
No idea.
Yeah.
We were a bit confused by that, but actually delegate is anyone attending.
Anyone attending, yeah.
Delegate. I thought it was delegate. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Because my pass says delegate, and I was like, ooh, that sounds nice. I thought it was all up and going and stuff.
Oh, no, I prefer it to sponsor. Delegate sounds cool, Sounds good.
Yeah, because I thought, like specific person of interest or something. Yeah. But it seems like there's so many different types of tickets over here too. There's sponsors, which is you guys, right?
Yep. I think there's sponsor one, team one, and delegate one. You had a sponsor and workshop one. I think so, yeah. I mean, look, delegate sounds good. Oh, you're a speaker. Yeah, speaker. Tobie's a speaker. So it's more official, yeah.
So what made you guys want to sponsor this event?
I think, we're big believers in Rust. We've built our entire product, our entire platform in Rust. And for us, we're also UK based. So importantly, this is the biggest conference outside of the US, and it's therefore an important place for us to be, important place for us to have a presence.
And the first one in London too. It's the first London Rust conference. So yeah, and it's also our first actual event sponsorship because we thought, why not do it with Rust, which we're built in?
Yeah, but originally this was not written in Rust or DB, right?
No. So originally we wrote the whole thing entirely in Golang until, when was it? 2021 that we decided to, we'd reached the limitations in Golang and we decided to rewrite the entire code base in Rust. There are some database platforms or software platforms out there which have certain parts in Rust, maybe plugins, maybe a certain part of their code base. For us, it just made sense to redo the whole thing in Rust, and from there it's just been amazing.
Now, why use Golang to begin with? Already using Golang before? Or?
Yeah, I mean, look, Golang had a hype around it, right? This is 2015.
So you bought into the hype.
You bought into the hype, and there are great databases built on top of Golang. Those databases are having to fight against the language in certain ways. We know that. I think the other thing is Golang is incredibly easy to get going with. That is one of the biggest selling points for Golang. You can get a team involved in a code base in a matter of days, not months. And that investment is just therefore much lower than other languages. But for us, we realized the limitations early on. I say early on. Once we'd built a good amount of functionality into the database and we wanted to go that little bit further, that's when we realized that actually to get where we wanted to go, we'd have to build a lot of custom code. And in Rust, there were ways of adding that same functionality much more easily than in Golang.
Now, what was the turning point where you said, okay, now it's time to rewrite? I mean, was it just let's rewrite in Rust, or must have been an exploration stage, right?
There's definitely an exploration stage, right? You play around with a library. The first library we added in was a nom crate. So this is a parser combinator library for effectively you can parse text, you can parse binary. For us, our query language, our SQL-like query language, SurrealQL, that needed to be parsed efficiently, but at the same time, we needed to add extra functionality in that for us, written in, when we wrote it in Golang, that extra functionality was just so much harder to write in. So yeah, we played around with changing the query language to begin with, and then bit by bit, we added the types, so the query language types in. And then from there, because of the beautiful way that Rust enables you to kind of manage your code, that was effectively a lot of the database, the types and the query language. And those same types get serialized to disk. So there's the logic of processing the queries and processing the responses. But the really core part of our code, which is the types, query language, and how those are stored, that's almost taken care of with Rust. Whereas in Golang, we were having to write our own custom code, our own custom serialization logic. We wrote our own custom serialization type called Cork, kind of similar to message pack, but slight differences, in order to eke out that performance. And in Rust, you just don't have to do that.
Okay. But why don't we kind of get back to the product itself, right? Maybe this is a good question for you, right? Which is about what exactly is SurrealDB and, why would I be interested in this?
The reason we built SurrealDB is back in 2015, we were building a really complicated SaaS product. Lots of different backends. We were using InfluxDB, DynamoDB, MySQL, Orient, and it was very complicated. We were spending 70% of our time on the back end managing all these different platforms and not the 30% and not the time what we needed in the front end. And we looked out in the database market and thought, there's got to be something out that does what we need to do in one platform, and there wasn't. So 2016-17, we started building it, and then 2018, we put it into production for ourselves. And as Tobie mentioned, end of 2021, we thought, look, this is pretty big. We reached limitation with Golang and wants to rewrite it in Rust. And then last year, August 2022, we basically public open beted it to the world and went a bit crazy.
I think it's also important to add that back in 2015, there were lots of elements which we have nowadays in Rust that just weren't there. And the ideas and the suggestions for how those were going to be added were there. But for instance, asynchronous code and asynchronous functions in Rust, it just wasn't there back in 2015. So Golang was the choice for us at the time. Nowadays, that's a completely different story.
And the reason why we built it is because it simplified our lives. And I think in most cases, right, if you can simplify your life in any way, especially in the work side of it, that's a crucial part of business. If you can save yourself time and money on the back end, focus on the front end where the money's being made and the business side of it, that's very important, especially for large corporations or even like small 1 or 2 man teams who are spending a lot of time sort of focusing on things that they shouldn't really be focusing on. And that's why we built Surreal, because it simplified our lives. And that's why we believe we have great traction now, because no one's done it before. It's simplifying a lot of people's lives, from 1 man teams right down to Series A to Series F back companies, and even FTSE 50 companies right now who are using it in both pre and post production, even in the beta stage, because you don't need like a massive team of people managing different parts of the back end to keep everything afloat. When actually, if you have one platform that does it all, that's fast, performant, and does everything you need to do. Don't get me wrong, as you said, right, there are certain cases where you need that niche database, right, to do certain niche parts of things, but a lot of the time you don't. And that's why SurrealDB helps and saves our lives, and clearly it's doing the same for people as well. So that's why we built it.
Now, the original project you guys were using this database on, is that project still around? Or
Yeah.
And many versions on from there. But yeah, the concept of what we were building was a CRM, and that CRM has now become a recruitment platform, so an applicant tracking system around a CRM. But effectively, the product we were building at the time was a software as a service CRM running in the cloud. As Jamie said, we were using Influx for time series data, Orient for relational data, MySQL for all other types of data, and MongoDB or DynamoDB for historical change set data. All of that running in CoreOS. I think that was a bit pre-Kubernetes, but yeah, all running in CoreOS. Load balancer layers and other microservices written in Golang or Node.js, and then this complicated real-time API layer where you connected through WebSockets in order to get real-time push notifications for any changes to the data. And all of that was a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
Can we build something as simple as Firebase with the simplicity of how you run it in the cloud? You can build applications directly against it from the front end, but with the power and the flexibility of all of those databases that we were using. And that's what we said. It was an ambitious idea. And I think the next 2016, 2017, it was kind of working out whether that was actually possible and how we would make it possible. What would we have to give up? Because obviously you can't build a database that does everything. What we've had to trade with other concepts. And I think where we've got now, it gives us what we want. It's simple. It's a whole platform, whether you want to build a back-end application or a front-end application, whether you want to handle your own authentication or whether you want SurrealDB to handle your authentication. It can do any of that. And it's designed to be the dream database for developers.
Plus, we've got a lot of features that we haven't really announced yet that obviously will elevate that too and allow us to reach sort of the enterprise stroke government levels of databases that we believe and we know that we can reach. So, yeah.
What kind of things would an enterprise want that, say, a normal kind of small business wouldn't need?
A key feature is encryption, and we're going to have encryption in our product, but being able to encrypt separate namespaces or databases, so being able to silo your data with different encryption is obviously much more interesting to businesses that need to keep their data separate. Another key feature that we've got on our roadmap and we always have our eye on in terms of where we're aiming for is historical versioning or temporal versioning of data. So being able to see how that data has changed over time. And not only that, how relationships and other records related to records in a table have changed as well. So effectively being able to version a graph and say, look, I want to find out all people who are connected to this person who knew this person and who purchased this product. But I want to run that as of June last year, because that was when the network, that person's network, was most relevant in my search. And that, with both relational, document, especially graph databases, is an incredibly complex query in terms of inserting your data and also querying that data.
Wow. So yeah, this database is like you said, a mix of a graph database, time series, relational. What else is in the mix then?
Yeah, I mean, so it's obviously got concepts of relational in that it has a query language. This is similar to traditional SQL. Deep down underneath the hood, it is a document database. So it's more similar to how MongoDB would store its data rather than Postgres. In terms of features, you can do time series data in it. Document data, you've got those record pointers, but you also have full graph connections. So you can do graph querying, bidirectional graph querying at the same time. In addition to that, we have custom functions written in JavaScript, which enable you to, if there's certain functionality that we don't have yet, you can completely augment that with your own code. And we've got WebAssembly plugins coming very soon, which will obviously add a whole other dimension to the product.
WebAssembly also. Okay, so if you want to add an extension, you'd have to use WebAssembly.
Yeah, effectively, either JavaScript or WebAssembly. That's kind of our aim, to be able to support writing plugins or custom code in JavaScript or TypeScript and also in WebAssembly. And I think that's another note. The database is designed to run in the cloud, but the database also runs in an embedded mode and or in the browser. So you can actually run it in your browser and run it on top of IndexedDB, using IndexedDB as a key value store. If you want to use it within Rust and you want to kind of embed it and use it similar to SQLite or DuckDB within your code, whether that's on an IoT device or whether it's on your own server, but within your code, it's also designed to do that. So we've built SurrealDB in a very layered way so that all of these different approaches are possible. And that same embedded method of running is actually how we run in the server. We have a server component sitting in front of the embedded database. So it's always going to be supported.
But the way you actually communicate with the database, I mean, that's using some custom kind of method. That's how it's actually using like REST-based, or there's different kinds of ways, GraphQL-based also.
Yeah, so we don't have GraphQL just yet. We will look to add that soon. Effectively, you can query it with REST. You can query it with WebSockets as well. And some of our community have asked for the Unix sockets as well. But effectively, the main way of querying is through WebSockets. You get that binary protocol that we've just recently added in. You get bidirectional messaging. And I think the main point is you're able to push SurrealQL queries down from a client. So let's say from a web browser to the server. And similar to GraphQL, you're actually able to say exactly which fields you want, or maybe how you should group that data or filter that data or order that data. So it's actually similar to GraphQL in that you can get all the data you want. There's no limitation with a kind of REST CRUD API. But you have the full power of a query language in the browser.
Okay. What's the limitations of running this in the browser? Because that sounds like they could be quite limiting. Because not everything's supported from, I'm guessing, using WASM, right?
Yeah, so it compiles to WebAssembly. It sits on top of IndexedDB. But we're not using any of the features that IndexedDB offers. We're literally just using it as a binary uint8 array key value store. And actually, you know what? It's surprisingly fast. It's never going to be as fast as a multi-threaded server in the cloud with lots of RAM. But it is surprisingly fast, and you can do graph queries and time series-based queries. And because of the way we built the database with these SurrealDB record IDs or record links, being able to run all those different types of queries is efficient when you're running on top of that key value store. So sure, look, there's always going to be limitations when running it in a browser, but surprisingly, not as bad as you think.
Now, running this thing in the cloud, right? It's not really supported by any of like the big three out of the box. I can't just go to like somewhere in AWS and say, give me a SurrealDB, right? So what is the process to set this up for a cloud? That's your domain.
That's exactly. I mean, look, we technically aren't fully open source. We are source available. We have a license on our cloud that stops you from obviously hosting your own paid cloud version of it. Because, when we first launched, people were saying online, look, these guys are devil child. They're not fully open source, But at the end of the day, you have to make a business out of something, and you've got to make a business out of it. You can have an amazing open source product, but without sort of the continued funding and traction you get from it, you can't really grow that. So we knew that in order for us to make a business out of it and take this further where we want to go, we had to sort of put a license on it. It's Apache license, after 4 years, right?
4 years it converts to Apache 2.0 license. Other than that, the only limitation, so it's a business source license, similar to MariaDB, similar to kind of different versions of CockroachDB as well.
Yep.
The only limitation on our business source license is that you can't run a paid hosted cloud offering. But yeah, it's a great question that you ask. And we are in talks with Amazon at the moment and in Google to offer a marketplace product so that you can very easily click and deploy SurrealDB on those platforms.
Yeah.
But also, we're going to have our fully managed cloud launch this year.
So do you think it'd be better to somehow run this on AWS itself, or actually, like, I'm trying to think about, if I were to choose to run this, would I want to run it through your guys' infrastructure, or would it be better if I somehow just spun up an EC2 and run it on there?
That's the thing, right? Yeah.
Both, right? Look, SurrealDB is designed to be really easy to run. Yeah, so you can run it in single node mode. We always wanted to build a database that was effectively one line of code or one line of scripting to get up and running if you want to run that in a single node. And in a distributed mode, it's a little bit more complex, but it's still not as complex as running a 80 microservice cluster is. It's designed to be simple, it's designed to be scalable, and it's designed to be easy to manage.
And we've got enterprises already saying, look, we've got 4 terabytes of data. We could run it ourselves, but we actually want to run it, you guys to run it. It simplifies it from our point of view. So yeah, you can do both. But I think you see a lot of people actually want to run it with us because it saves them a lot of time.
I also find it quite interesting too, because a lot of these corporates, they usually don't like to host stuff outside of their data centers. So, but you're saying you have quite a few enterprises who are ready to say, we want you to do it. Now, why is that?
I think more and more people are moving to the cloud. As long as the standard way of building and running those clouds is there and the certifications. But also, a lot of people are now moving to AWS, to Google. And as long as we're running in their data centers, we're also very transparent in how we're going to be building our cloud. We're going to be very transparent in how it's run, what the layers are, what the security is. It's important if you're building a database, a fundamental core piece of technology, that you are transparent in how you run things, And a lot of database platforms or data API platforms out there really know what's happening under the hood. They're using lots of different managed services. They're using lots of different code and different languages, all pieced together to make this service or this platform that runs. With Surreal, what you see in our code base is what we're going to be running in our cloud. And in addition to how we orchestrate our cloud, that's also going to be open source as well. So we want to be very transparent. More and more organizations are moving to the cloud, to Amazon, to Azure, to Microsoft, and that's where we're going to be as well. If you do want to host it privately, and we have been speaking with enterprises and organizations who will not be hosting in AWS or Google, then we will be offering enterprise support licensing as well and support contracts for that.
On that note about security as well, it's very important. We want to make sure that you get one shot with your cloud ready, your cloud launch. You want to make sure. So that one of our first initial hires is going to be our head of security, former IBM, turned down GitHub Europe because the team was too small. We want to make sure that it's paramount to everything we do with our cloud and make sure that when we launch it, you get that one shot and you nail it. Because a lot of these sort of tech companies, security is kind of an afterthought or the last thought in the thing. We'll build it and then we'll do security at the end. From our point of view, it has to be there at the forefront. It's so important, especially if you want to hit the enterprise and government levels too. So yeah, he's coming on board soon as well.
What kind of encryption are you guys going to be looking to put in? Is it AES 256 or something? Or
interesting. I can't remember the name of it. One of our community members recently suggested a quantum secure encryption method so that, I think this is one that Cloudflare is already using. So that's obviously the area that our head of security is going to be looking at. And he's, better placed to be doing that than us. But yeah, we're not just going to be putting something in that is a standard and everyone knows. We're thinking for the future here.
Yeah.
And it's important that you are able to rotate those keys so that you're able to change that encryption, on a timely basis. It's important that you're using, especially for the kind of organizations we're already talking to, that encryption needs to be thinking about, years in the future, not just what's safe now.
Okay. Now, kind of going back to the license part, right? So I think you said, we were talking before the show, I think you said something about, like the license that you guys have is not open source, right? And that you guys got dinged for that. Can you explain some more? Yeah, source of
Yeah, when we first launched, we obviously garnered a lot of stars on GitHub. Open source product, 18,000 now on GitHub now stars, and then stars a thing, but we technically aren't fully open source. So when we did we put 4 announcements out. We did one on Reddit, subreddit on programming and Rust, And then we did an Indie Hackers post, and obviously we went on Hacker News too. And there were a lot of comments, saying, "Oh, these guys are the devil child. They're not fully open source. They've got a license." Yeah, we have a license, but only for the hosted cloud version of it. The rest you can fully use completely. It's fully open source, and we make that totally clear in our license. You just can't run a cloud version of it. And you're going to get people who say, they are not a fully open source company, and we technically aren't. We are source available, but we have made everything as easy as possible for you to use. You just can't run your own cloud version.
I think it's important to note the business source license. There are other licenses similar to it. You've got the server-side public license from MongoDB. You've got Elasticsearch's license. The business source license isn't recognized as an open source license by the Open Source Initiative. But Bruce Perrins, who is a fundamental person at the Open Source Initiative, he's actually given it his okay. So even though it's not recognized as a fully open source license, it's definitely designed to be open. And as I say, in ours, we don't limit it in as many ways as other players do. Some people limit it on size of clusters, on the amount of data, on features. We're limiting it on just one thing, which is you can't run a paid cloud.
What we did want to do is have a fully open source product. And then right before we start to make a business of it, we then fully close it. And, like, for example...
Well, it's happened in numerous occasions where you grow that community, open source, you benefit off that community, and then you close source your product. We didn't want to do that. I think also you're seeing more and more core libraries written in JavaScript, written in Golang, written in Rust, where thousands and thousands of man hours are spent on building these core libraries. Yeah. And the maintainers are getting paid $30, $100 a month in donations for those libraries. And those libraries are holding up the internet. And this kind of way of supporting open source needs to change. Now, we want to support our community and build a great product that they can use. And if you want to run your software as a service product, if you want to build a game on top of it, if you want to use it in your blockchain, if you want to analyze terrorism networks on a massive scale, you can do that, no problem. And we always want to be able to support that. But there have been databases in the past that raised significant amounts of money, built great products, and didn't manage to support that product going forward because they weren't able to make a business out of it. And that only affects the community in the long run.
Yeah. And community is a massive part. It's very, very important to our product. I mean, when we first launched, it was just the two of us. We made sure that we replied to pretty much every single comment we could on Discord, on Hacker News, on Reddit, because it's very important that even if someone has a disparaging comment about the fact that you're a devil child for having a non-license on your product, you've got to respond, say, look, I appreciate your feedback. And this is the reason we've done it, but thank you for your comment. We make sure that we have to bring the community with this product as we build. For example, we did a type form to our Discord community asking them, what are you most looking forward to with SurrealDB? And what we thought they were most looking forward to, that we potentially might have built first, was number 14 on the list. And that for us, if you don't ask your community, grow with your community, and bring them along on the journey, you aren't really going to have a great product. Because there are a number of database companies out there that don't include their community. They don't follow anyone back on their social medias. They don't communicate with their community. And that for us doesn't work. A great product with no community is, in our opinion, a dead product. So we need to make sure that with great events, both online and offline, keeping them updated with our roadmap and being open and transparent about what we're building and how we build it, but also relatable. We want to make sure that we as founders, once we get to a certain stage with this business, and we believe it can go very far and potentially IPO, that we are still accountable and can be spoken to and talked to at any level. If a 14-year-old person on Discord asks a question about, hey, I like Surreal, how do I get started? We respond to that because in a few years' time, that person might want to use SurrealDB at a company he's working for or in his startup that he started. It's very important that if you show love in our product, we want to show you love back. And that's tantamount to our product, is the community as well. And bearing in mind that the Rust community, that's a great community. I mean, when we put our posts on Rust and Reddit and also on LinkedIn and stuff, great response from the community. Yeah, really, really great people.
Of course, the question that comes up in my mind about the licensing part is this must be directly related to MongoDB,
We don't want to name names, of course, but yeah, MongoDB, great product, and they built a great business. And just before they went public, they converted from, I can't remember if it was a GPL to a SSPL. And, fundamentally, there's no real differences in that. Given that we're starting now, or, last year, we thought we'd be transparent from the beginning. It's a slightly different time. Back when MongoDB started in 2008, that was a different way. When they IPO'd, I think, 2018, that was just a different time. Today, we're trying to be more transparent and open up front.
And as I mentioned at the beginning as well, look, they're amazing open source products. They haven't really got a business model and pricing model, how to make a business out of it. You can raise great funds, but they can be great products, but they can't really go anywhere without some kind of business plan and structure. And in a way, the license for the cloud is simply just a business plan, in terms of monetizing it to continue growing that business and growing the database to where we believe it can get to. Don't get me wrong. I mean, look, we plan to have a pricing structure for the cloud that is very, very open and very, very appealing to people on the free tier upwards. Well, we want to make sure that it's not kind of in a way kind of a simple free tier, then a $30. We want to make sure that actually the tier we're looking at doing is very, very, very appealing to people to come on board from other companies and say, look, let's use theirs instead of theirs.
So who is your direct competitors?
It's a really big question, that. Because of the kind of varied functionality and scope of SurrealDB, we've got competitors across so many different areas.
The question we get asked a lot, right, is who uses you? We've got game developers, you've got, SaaS people, and they're coming from Sura, Supabase, you've got people coming from Neo4j, Mongo, Cockroach. They're coming from everywhere. So in a way, we can't really put it into,
effectively, you've got people using us from a back-end platform perspective. So they're using us like they would a traditional database, like MongoDB, Postgres, Neo4j. And then on the other hand, you've got people using us building front-end applications and using us as a kind of back-end as a service. These people are coming from Firebase or Supabase or AppRiot, Hasura. It's very varied where they're coming from and what they're using us for. I think one of the main reasons they're coming to us is that flexibility. The fact that you're not having to pre-think up front how you might design or store your data. You can store your data and then augment that data and add time series to that data and add graph to that data. It's never going to replace InfluxDB or TimescaleDB. If you need a 100% time series database because you are storing just time series data, perhaps CPU recordings from a data center, you're not going to benefit from being on SurrealDB. And the same goes for graph. If you're doing protein analysis for drug research, then you're going to benefit from a graph database like Neo or TypeDB.
But the majority of companies, people do not need that. We are a Swiss Army knife of database in a way. Like Tobie said, you have those niche cases, but the majority of companies do not need to have those niche cases.
Most people sit in the middle, their document data, their core data, and they want to augment that with time series data and graph data. And 90% of those use cases, we want to be the database of choice.
And a lot of the developers have said online as well, we get the comments like, it's made it fun again. It's made databases fun. And that's a good comment to have, because if you can make actually doing the back end fun, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I never heard somebody ever saying databases are you made it fun, right?
I know. Yeah, we honestly
it's
have
not
a lot of
necessarily
comments.
a bad time, but I can understand, right?
Yeah.
So you must be able to support like transactions and things like that. Do you have ACID compliancy?
Yeah, so that's really important of SurrealDB. ACID is, there was a time maybe in the 2010, 2015 when people ditched ACID for scalability. I think developers are coming around full circle, and actually ACID is a necessity. Developers want to know that if you're pushing data into this table, that table, and that table, that has gone into all three tables or not at all. Not data sporadically ending up in different tables and you don't really know how. And then having to build your own logic in front to effectively do transactions. SurrealDB, ACID, that's an aim. So currently you can run your transactions across tables. You can run it across a distributed cluster. There are no limitations to, you can run multiple queries in a transaction as well if you want. If you don't use specific transactions, every single query is run in its own transaction. So if you update a table and it fails, no records are updated.
So you don't have to explicitly say you're in a transaction, you're saying?
You don't have to, but you can also say, look, I want to run these 4 different statements under one transaction. So they all fail or all succeed.
Okay. I mean, we've been talking about how good SurrealDB is, but I want to go to the other part, which is what would SurrealDB not be a good candidate for?
There's niche cases, right?
The niche cases. So effectively, if you're just storing time series data and you want to query that in only a time series manner, then you're going to benefit from a database that's storing that data in a way designed for querying in that similar way. So it's storing ranges of time next to each other. Maybe it's reducing the amount of data collected as time goes by, and it's doing that automatically behind the scenes because you don't need nanosecond precision in a week's time. You only need hourly chart precision, let's say. So time series database is always going to have that functionality designed for that use case. If you're doing, the big one is analytics, right? If you're doing analytics on column or tabular data, then you're going to be using a data lake to a completely different type of database. So there are we wanted to build a database that did a lot and simplified developers' lives. And we know this. You definitely cannot build a database that does everything. It would be brilliant if you could, but it's not possible. The laws of physics dictate that that is not possible. So yes, SurrealDB can do a lot. It can't do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I did have one more question too, right? So you talked about how I believe you said, kind of the core of the way things are stored is similar to MongoDB, right? So you have collections as document database, but you're calling them tables, right? What is actually the nomenclature for different things? Like, is it similar to SQL where you have tables and then you have rows of records? Is it the same kind of style you have?
So in SurrealDB, you have tables. So similar to Postgres tables, similar to MongoDB collections. Effectively, though, instead of rows, so every single document can be schemaless, which means every single document could have different data. You can define a schema for your database or for your tables, and in which case each record has to look or have the same fields. But under the hood, those records are still stored in a document way. So each record stores the document, the field names along with each field. So I guess that's another negative to the database when you're comparing it to a true relational database. The relational database will store the column types and then just store the values with those columns. In SurrealDB, as with other document databases, you're storing the fields along with that. That gives you the flexibility to have nested arrays, nested objects, which can or don't have to be assigned a schema, but it also gives you that limitation of the size of your data will be slightly larger because you're storing more information with each record.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have any more questions on my side. There's something else that you think everybody should know about SurrealDB before we sign off?
Hey, look, if you haven't tried it, give it a try. I mean, we believe this can be the de facto database in the world. It's simplified our lives and made it a lot easier for us to build things. And if you haven't tried, like I said, give it a go. We think you'll like it.
And with that, thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam.